Hello, every pony. I'm here to answer more questions that I asked you guys to give me. And the first question that I have left is about anatomy and if I have any tips to give for anatomy. And the number one tip I would share with anyone regarding anything in art, not just anatomy, would be to use photographic references to draw from real life, because this way you cannot learn another artist's mistakes or habits you may not want in your own art. And if you learn via tracing or copying art, you will learn someone else's issues, and you will add on to the issues you will develop naturally in drawing. So the best thing to practice with would be photographic references. Now the rest of the anatomy tips I have are just handy tips, small things to know. I would begin with knowing that your elbow reaches your belly button, your navel. And going past that, your fingertips, when rested on each side of your body, should reach your mid-thigh. That is, of course, in most people with typical proportions. Some people may have differing proportions. Some people may just be different. It may not exactly be this, but that is the case in most cases. Another tip would be that the space in between your two eyes is most often the space of one of your eyes. So overall, the space would be 3 eyes wide, at least. The next tip I have would be that the top and bottom portions of your legs, with your knee being the midway portion, are equal. So do not make my mistake and make the bottom portion so much longer. The next tip I have would be the size of ears. They most often reach the top of your eyes and the bottom of your nose. Now, this also varies from person to person. This is just the most common guideline to use. Of course, ears get bigger and smaller depending on the person. Their face proportions may be different because they're them. That really depends on the character you're drawing. The next tip I have would be keeping in mind where your character stores body fat. The most common body fat storage locations would include breasts, your belly, your hips, your upper arms, your thighs, and what seems to be your face. Now, this will vary from person to person. Most commonly, it varies from men and women. Of course, you see women more often with breasts, and more often you see men storing their fat in their bellies, as well as women storing their fat in their hips. It really depends on hormones. That's just secondary sex characteristics. But it also depends on the individual. Men may develop breasts due to different conditions or hormone production. Women may be developing a lot of fat in their bellies. That just depends on the individual. But those are in fact the places in which most fat is stored. Another tip would be that finger length varies depending on person to person. I'm sure you've heard of the whole straight male finger lengths versus lesbian woman finger lengths. Personally, my ring finger is longer than my index finger. Both are shorter than my middle finger. So that doesn't determine your orientation or your sex or your gender. That's just random, depending on probably your genetics. So don't get too worried when you're drawing something as small as finger lengths. My last tip that I can offer regarding anatomy is that the adult human body is usually 5 to 6 heads tall. This, of course, varies depending on the person, their proportions, their height, but this seems to be the most common case. The next question I have is asking how to make your lines smoother or how to achieve smoother line art. Now, in my video about Paint Tool Sai, I did go into detail about using the stabilizer. You can find your stabilizer at the top of Sai, and it's literally just a drop-down menu of numbers. 0, I think, is the default. You can set it to a higher number and it will stabilize your brush. It will make your lines much smoother depending on how high you go. And this is a really, really helpful tool to be using, especially if you're an artist like myself who has shakier hands. I've personally known a lot of people who use the stabilizer and need it because they, for whatever reason, can't keep their hands steady enough to draw as smoothly as they would prefer. Another question I've been asked is how I do the backgrounds I draw when I do in fact draw detailed backgrounds, scenery backgrounds and the like. And the answer to that would be exactly the same as my first anatomy tip. I use photographic references. Most often, I either use the reference my customer has given me to use for their commission, or for personal work, I take photos myself, because that way I can make it resemble the original photo as closely as possible, and it will still remain my work. And I really don't like to worry about crediting other people and accidentally forgetting. So due to this, I just make my own content to use, or I use the content of people I know that I will be able to credit properly. Another question I've gotten is, how do I go about making a character? This honestly varies depending on character to character, and I most often start out with a smaller idea. Lately, what my modus operandi has been is making a design that I like a lot and pairing it with an idea that I've had for a while now that I wrote down in a note on my phone. What I do with that is, in my phone, I use an iPhone, so there's an app called Notes. And in this app, I have a note, which is just a list of ideas for my art and my characters. And this is honestly how I go about creating most of my recent characters. So I write down anything that inspires me, I save anything that inspires me, be it a photo, a piece of writing. I write something down, I save the photo, and I just keep it in mind for the future for when I'm ready to use it. This applies to every aspect of character creation for me. When I'm finally ready, I combine all of those traits. Anyway, thank you for listening, and goodbye.